I'll bring up Tyler. We're going to talk about this new initiative that have come up with, Rethink Lex. So here we go. Here's Tyler.
Good morning. I'm going to hand it over to the mayor and to Aldona here in a minute to talk about the larger piece of this initiative that has a more direct impact on everyone else. But I wanted to talk more about how the administration is approaching this in a larger context. We've came into this administration this year with a lot of issues financially and otherwise that we met head on, and I think we see the writing on the wall. There's a lot more challenges ahead of us. There's never a great time to really dig into ways to become more efficient and ways to look at diversification of our revenue streams and those kind of things. But we got to start now. I think we see the writing on the wall. We've got a good team externally that's looking at the overall economic health of our city, with the understanding that there's always a conversation about rising fixed expenses here in government, slowing of revenues, the potential for whatever may come on the national scale that might impact us as a recession. But we've got a good opportunity now to do a lot of things, and action, I think, is what it's all about. I think that's what's expected from our constituents. It's what's expected from our employees to make sure we are continue to make this a good place to work, to protect our benefits to everyone, and to continue to provide the same services that the city's always demanded from this government. So, with that said, we're doing a lot of things. Like I said, we're looking at our entire financial makeup. We're looking at in-house, how do we become more efficient through our budgeting process, and then we'll also look at how do we become more efficient and more modernized in how we do business. And I'll let Aldona talk more about that, but I want the mayor to be able to give you a few more encouraging words as well.
Well, I'm on a roll because who thought it was a good idea to have a crane in the middle of Limestone at rush hour? Oh, well. So good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all, and I have just a few things I wanted to say. As most of you know, my second week in office, I bumped up against the hard realities of budget and finance, and wasn't really expecting that just so soon. But it was what it was, and so it really caused me and my team to do a sudden, we've got to take a good hard look at some things. So I want to talk just a couple minutes, not too long, about this. So what we're doing is, and this is going to involve everybody in government. What we're doing is standing up these 3 work groups. And the first one is about our financial and economic health. And this has everything to do with digging deep into our systems to see whether we can do things differently as far as revenues. And we all know what happened with the budget. Our revenues, the line was going down, and our fixed cost, the line was going up. And there's no way to sustain that for a long time. And it's a hard reality, but I'm an optimist, so I know we can work through this and get to a better place for our government. So I look at it as all about the health and the sustainability of our government. And that is so important to our citizens. And we, as you know, in the budget, we were forced to cut expenses. And every one of you in here knows what we did, and reset the spending for our budget to make it out of the fiscal year 19 healthy. And then the same thing happened with fiscal year 20 because our revenue projections didn't look any better. So the second group is about budgeting. And this is the funniest thing in here. So we've got a little group of law is here, a little group of planning is there. Y'all don't mix and mingle much, do you? I love to mix and mingle. When I was first on the council, I said to Paul Schoniger, "Are there any assigned seats?" And he said, "No, not really." However, I soon found out that every meeting I'd sit in a different chair and somebody'd say, "You're in my chair." And I'd say, "Well, it didn't have your name on it." So it's great to, have our groups here. We'll be doing lots of mixing and mingling before this whole project is done. But our budgeting process, as a government, we've never really looked at this in total since merger. Do you remember how long ago that was? 1974? Some of you were not born by then, right? So it's time for us to take a good hard look at what we do budget-wise, finance-wise, and we have some awesome out-of-government people who have agreed to work on this with us. And these are people who have fabulous expertise and experience in these areas. People like, I can't name everybody, but people like Merle Hackbart and John Cubine and Linda Hume and J.D. Cheney of Kentucky League of Cities. Those kind of folks are volunteering their time to help us look deep inside our processes for budget and finance. So we have been talking about Rethink Lex ever since basically we were in our budget discussions in the spring. And we have to do this to maintain our health. And so this is, before I go further, this has nothing to do with jobs. This is all about processes and revenues and finance and how can we do it better. So you all and our employees will be really key to this process. This is where the work will be done. And I feel that our employees, which every day I ask, how many do we have? Well, the latest number is 3,028. And do you know that a small business is a business with 50 or fewer people? And we are a series of small businesses. We are the equivalent of many small businesses in our government. It's pretty exciting. So the question is, how do we knit those small businesses together in the best possible way so that we all feel good about the fact that we're doing this in the best way we can do it? And you all have the ideas, the creativity, the experience. I bet if we added up all the experience in this room, it's thousands of years, probably. And that's very powerful. So you have the knowledge and the skill and the understanding to help us move forward in this. So that is really what I wanted to say is I'm optimistic and excited about this. And this is going to be a process where nobody says that'll never work. Everything's going to be on the table. And that's a hard thing to do. So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and want to bring up Aldona Valicenti, whom you know is our Chief Information Officer. And she's going to kind of take us through the third part. You know, the budget team is the first part, the finance is the second, and her part is the third. So welcome, Aldona, and thank you again for all being here. Here you go.
I've got a mic.
You've got a mic.
Yes, they didn't
She
give
is
you one.
mic'd. Okay, and I am no longer mic'd. Where shall I put this?
You know, yeah, that'll be fine. Good morning. Thank you, Mary. You know, one of the issues is always of interest. How do you follow the mayor and make sure that I have the attention of everybody? Now, remember, Glenn asked you to turn off your cell phones or to mute them. What I'm going to ask you is to turn off your judgment. So let me say it again. I ask you to turn off your judgment. Because if you start judging from the minute I show the slides and talk through the processes, I don't know that we'll have a chance of success. So think with an open mind. Now, the mayor mentioned Paul Schoniger, and I'm going to mention him also, because you're all thinking, why is the computer lady up here? Because that's what he called me. He could never remember my name. At best, sometimes he could remember Aldona, but he always talked about the computer lady. So why is this computer lady up here talking about Rethink Lex? Okay. Are we stuck?
It's just the intro slide.
All right, sorry. But anyway, so the computer lady is up here for a couple of reasons, and that's not on any slide. I've actually had some experience in doing this a couple of times. You know, I worked in the private sector most of my career. I worked in the petrochemical and the chemical business. And in the last 5 years, when I worked in the, as the Houstonians say, the oil business, in 5 years, we re-engineered a Fortune 15 company 3 times. That's really kind of turning everything upside down. Now, I came to work for the state. And when I got to the state, we were doing Empower Kentucky. Empower Kentucky also looked at processes, how do we do things better. So I thought what might be good to start with is to look at what are the synonyms for rethink. And these are straight. When you go to the internet, these are the synonyms. And the ones I picked are the ones that I highlight in yellow. And the reason I did that is because I think that we might want to focus in on some of those things. So what are we expecting out of rethink? Well, I'll tell you what, I want to focus on the right side there. I want to see things in a new light and take another look at stuff. By stuff, all the things that we do as a government. So this is I call this the obligatory slide. You got to have an agenda. What are we going to talk about? How long is it going to take? What are the benefits? I'm not going to go through that. But I want to give you a little bit of background. This kind of discussion, this kind of rethinking, reorganizing, reviewing, started in the financial business in the 90s. And they did that because, you know what, the first consolidations were, they were in the banking business. Because you could get a large computer, you could consolidate offices, you could actually take smaller banks and have them run the backlog and all the financial end of it in a huge monolithic center and sometimes. And by the way, banks are still consolidating. You might have a new name for your bank. It then moved on. It moved on to manufacturing. It moved on to that's where ERP systems grew up in the manufacturing environment, because as people were making goods, they wanted to know how much inventory they had. They wanted to know how they're going to sell their goods, et cetera. This has been going on for a long time in the private sector. And then you remember when, quote, Detroit was in trouble. And we had bailout Detroit because the car industry was no longer quite the same way, because the Japanese were coming with their cars. Better quality, they lasted longer, all that stuff. So we had this whole quality movement. And by the way, one of our largest plants, just a little bit north of Lexington, is still practicing continuous improvement. Part of the culture. So what has happened now is that you'll see governments are doing much of the same thing. Many states, some of it at a smaller level, some of it at a more aggressive level, the continuous improvement process and consolidation. Our state in their IT is consolidating, many of the things. So what we've got here is really the opportunity in these movements to look at how we do our business. By the way, just at the last count, I talk about governments, local and state governments, federal governments. Federal governments not so much because they're too far removed from the citizen. But local and federal and state governments are much closer to the citizen. Most local governments, like ours, have at least 46 processes, if not more. We are the largest service business. Whether it's cleaning the streets, whether it's paving the streets, whether it's providing protection, emergency services, all of that, that is a service business. Our citizens are the clients. Our citizens give us tax money, and we provide the service. Now, when I first came to the state, people told me, oh, things are not working so well, we need lots of improvement. Expectations of government is very, very low. And guess what? We meet it all the time. So here is a chance to kind of turn that around. So timing. Mayor's already talked about this. Why now? We took 15% out of every budget. So the question is, with 15% less, how are we going to examine what we deliver? How are we going to sustain that over a longer period of time? How are we going to identify those things that we can improve? I've got a pointer here, so let's see if it works. Identify potential delays. What are we going to do right away? What needs to be? And then identify lasting changes over this process. Because we want to make things more efficient long term. Because you know what? So what are the benefits? Well, if you look at the benefits, for the first time we can examine our work. Whoops, sorry, let me go back. We want to examine our work back here and assess if it's still needed. One of the things that I found when I first got here, and by the way, I've been here close to 6 years now, we have no list of services. There isn't one. We kind of know what everybody does. We know through our budgeting process, we allocate this much money to do this and this much money to do that. But if somebody came to you and said, give me a list of services that your department, your area provides, we would have to make it up. We don't really have a good way sometimes to figure out what the cost to deliver that service is. We know very well that it costs us money. Sometimes it's a direct cost. We know how much we might pay a vendor. We might know how much we pay somebody else to provide that for us. We might know that it takes 2 or 3 or 4 people to do this, but we don't really know that because we really haven't been grounded in thinking about our services that way. I won't belabor this. So, what's the plan? What are we going to do? How does it work? Well, we're going to establish a program office. Now, why do we need a program office? We need a program office to give us some guidelines so they all play by the same rules. We need a program office to keep track of how many services we've identified, which ones we just leave alone, and which ones do we carry forward and examine. We need a scorecard of what we're doing. Measurement, if you measure something, you pay attention to it. If you don't measure, chances are you don't pay attention to it. So why am I talking to all of you about this? Well, here's the big difference. We didn't hire a consultant to come in and do this top-down. Most organizations, and especially in the private sector, because sometimes funds are not an issue. They'll hire a consultant. A consultant will say, what is our goal? What are we going to achieve? What are we going to do? And here's the number that we got to meet. We're not doing that. We're not doing that at all. And this is the reason that we asked you to bring either your deputy or your administrative officers or someone that's going to help us take the lead. This is about employees telling us what works and what doesn't work and what could work better. Now, I've heard it on all sides. The minute we started to talk about this, I've had a couple employees that came to me and they said, it's never going to work. I've had an employee come to me and say, I took a whole bunch of opportunities to my manager, and my manager said, it isn't going to work. And so that was forgotten. I've had folks from your ranks talk about this is not going to work. We've done this 100 times. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. Well, you know what? If that is what we believe, I will tell you that it will not work. But it has a greater chance of working if we believe that our employees who provide the service, who do that every day, have some input on the possibility of doing that better. Or maybe it doesn't need to be done at all. So we're looking at all things. So let me go back. So the benefits, assess fee structure. You know, we did that already. We did that through the budgeting process. How many of you remember the discussion that we had about building permits? The city of Lexington had the lowest charge for a building permit. We've raised that now because all the surrounding communities were higher than us. And you know, this discussion just occurred yesterday. We were talking to council members. And at least to our knowledge, no council member has gotten a complaint about that. Because we weren't even recovering our cost of providing that service. So part of it is to really look at the cost structure. We will not be able to do it all. You can't. You've not had the ability to look at what it costs to deliver something. But sometimes you know that it takes 2 people to do this or 3 people to do that. So identification of the number of people involved to deliver a service is beneficial, because then we can estimate what that cost might be. And then if you look at the very last part, is the service duplicated? Is somebody else doing it? The greatest duplication occurs when 2 departments or 3 departments or 4 departments are required to produce something, because you've got a handoff from one department to another department. Some of it is overlap. There is always some overlap. So that should make us think, is the structure appropriate? Is there a better way to deliver that service with less redundancy? So this is about delivering services. So let me go forward. I said we already talked about a program office. I'm going to move on. This is what the structure looks like. And I know you might have a hard time reading it. But I want to start from the bottom and go up. We are going to do this for 6 months. After 6 months, there's still a continuing progress, continuing looking at projects. But you can only sustain something for about 6 months, and then after that, your employees and we're all going to get tired of it. We have, across the bottom here, let me see if I can use my pointer right there. How many divisions do you think we have? Quick guess. How many? How many? 52. Okay. How many?
You would know.
All right. All right, thank you, Pat. We have over 50, so it's probably 52. We're not quite sure. Every division is to participate. The focal point is going to be with you, the directors, your administrative officers, or whoever that you choose, maybe a deputy, to help lead this. And if you go up, so let me go up, we're going to have, that's me, an executive steering committee. I've got administrative officers here, and this is the program office. This is probably the only outside person that we're going to have through this process that's going to keep track. And so guidelines, statistics, tracking, communication, all of that. All right, here's the makeup of the executive committee. Mr. Glenn Brown, our chief financial officer back there, Bill, Tyler, as you can see, go down. So there's a little number here, 1 and 2. Commissioners will change as we change the focus of what we're looking at. Council members will change. We've started with Susan Lamb and James Brown. Susan Lamb, because she actually heads the committee on general services, government services, because that's where we're going to start. And then it goes down. We've asked Arthur to participate so that he can get involved in some of the processes that we're looking at. I know some of you might have a hard time seeing this, but anyway. By the way, this is going to be available for you immediately after you leave this room. All right, who's going to be involved? I already mentioned. What'd you say? 52 divisions. All divisions participate. The pace may vary. And, in some cases, it may be very easy. In other cases, it may be more difficult because the processes are much more complex, much more difficult to determine. We'll provide direction and guidance. There is no big blueprint. You got to do A, B, C, D. Each one is going to be a little bit different. And the first action is really just to identify services. What do you do? What do your employees do? Write it down. I run a machine that does this. I provide citizens with this information. And then we can go deeper. Some things, I'll tell you, probably work just fine. We want to leave it alone. If we had to look at everything, there isn't enough time. But we can look at those things where we have input that it could be done better or differently. We provide some services, trust me, to very, very few people in some cases. Maybe that service is best provided in a different way. So that's probably what the scorecard is about. So, if you look at how do we capture that? All right, what will we have? We'll have an inventory of services. We have never, ever had that. And you know what happens? We'll go through a process, we add a service, we never go back and get rid of anything. Or we never go back and say, this service we have now improved, so maybe this is no longer required. Every business needs to do that because you can't sustain it any other way. So let me interject a couple of things that I've learned sort of over the years. In the private sector, it's very clear that companies go out of business if they don't keep current with products and services. Governments don't go out of business. My point is, in many cases, they become irrelevant. And then you also hear that, why don't you run government like a business? Why can't you run government like a business? You can't. And I've studied this for a while now. There's 3 reasons governments are not businesses. Number 1, there's no true bottom line. There's no profit. There's no loss. Number 2, there's no shareholders and a stock price. And number 3, governments do not choose their products and services, nor their customer base. Luxury car dealers, producers, know that they can produce a luxury car because they know their customer base. Every citizen, every visitor to this city and county is a customer. We do not determine who they are. We provide services no matter who they are. That's the difference, and I think that that's the challenge for government. So, our goal, eliminate any duplication. It's very clear. Once we know what the services are, is one department maybe doing something that another department is doing? Or maybe they can be combined. I don't know. I don't have the answer. But you know what? Your employees will have the answer. Because they will know exactly, oh my God, I was talking to that person over there. And we provide something very infrequently. Maybe there's a better way to do that. That is our challenge. All right. Pilots, and I'm going to ask Monica to come up here because we had a small group that we're working with. We would like to give you some examples, and she's going to do that.
Thanks, Aldona. Good morning. Good morning. Just to give you a little bit of background and tell you about our 2 pilot projects that we've been looking at in parks. Like all of you here today, you work on efficiencies all the time, right? Everybody's doing that already. It's just a matter of putting it down on paper and then how you go about approaching that. So we've been working on electronic gift cards, right? So for our pools and for our golf courses, electronic gift cards make sense. It takes a lot less paper and a lot less time. Electronic timekeeping. Parks still use time cards. We buy time cards, we add them up by hand. It's just a lot of time and resources that we could be spending other things to improve our operations. So when we looked at this initially, the first area that really came to mind was maintenance. And I thought, I'm going to call Chris Cooper-Ryder, and I'm not going to do it face-to-face so I don't get the eye roll, right? What? Are you kidding me? Again, we're going to go through this process. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. But Parks maintains over 105 parks, right? We maintain community centers. We maintain historical homes. We maintain fields. We do over 300 special events. I mean, we do all these things. And I'm thinking, if there's one area that could probably identify some quick efficiencies, it's got to be parks and maintenance. So I said, Chris, I need you to go to your team. I just want you to talk about what could we be doing differently. It's not about using less people, but it's about how we use those people differently and how we make our spaces better, deliver better service in a more efficient way. So the first area that we identified was based on the Parks Master Plan, which we completed in 2018, and it was about naturalization. How do we identify acreage within our 105 parks that we don't have to mow, spend money on fuel, reduce emissions, and reduce our wear and tear on our mowers? So we identified 60 acres. These are acreage that isn't used for passive play, so it's not areas where kids are going to go and play kickball or play soccer. They're not programmed areas. They're maybe on a slope or a small area that can easily be naturalized. It fits in well with our mayor's Monarch Pledge, increasing pollinator gardens, just being environmentally more sustainable in our parks. And through that, we anticipate about a $30,000 to $40,000 annual savings. Now, we had to consider a lot of things and objectives. How close is that to a neighborhood? Because we know neighbors, not all neighbors are going to want a naturalized area in their backyard. We had to look at what are the water quality efforts that can be improved with this. And this was really a compilation of folks on this project. So Michelle Kasiniak, Planning and Design, Chris with Maintenance, our Natural Areas team, we worked with Environmental Services to really identify these areas. That $30,000 to $40,000 comes not only in the labor and the maintenance and repair, fuel, those types of things, but also contract services. So how can that be spent? Maybe better use with our porta potty contractor. Who doesn't want better standards for porta potties, right? So it's not about, oh, we're gonna save $15,000 in contract mowing. It's we're gonna be able to spend those dollars in another area to better improve our service. It's not about we're going to save $15,000 and hire less people to mow our own mowers. It's about we're going to be able to use those people to provide better restroom experience in our standard restrooms, or to repair fences or paint fences to better maintain our parks. The other one that we looked at was the downtown landscape crew. We have 2 crews with 2 employees each that alternate watering in downtown. Who does not love the downtown beautiful hanging baskets? Right, planters, we've got over 200 planters, 200 hanging baskets, and they require a lot of time and effort from our team. They're very labor intensive. So Chris and his team had initiated a pilot program maybe 2 years ago where they invested in a handful of self-watering hanging baskets. And we found when we tested that would save about 20% of labor of going out and watering those hanging baskets, right? Pretty simple investment, saves us in the long run, about $30,000 in labor costs. It takes a $12,000 investment in year 1. We anticipate about a $1,000 recurring annual investment, which is basically due to vandalism, theft, people steal our flowers, that kind of thing. But we're gonna be able to save about $30,000. And that is going to help us when Town Branch Trail comes on board. We'll have more labor to put towards new amenities that are coming to the city. We'll have more efforts to spend in maintaining our downtown parks as they exist today, which is such an important part of our fabric in creating these spaces in Lexington. So that just gives you a little bit of background about how we approached our 2 initial projects. Thanks.
Thank you, Monica. I'm going to move on and provide you with a couple of other examples that we're looking at. Some of them are internal. Some of them are in the information technology area. You know, we manage, or at least attempt to manage, the overall usage of cell phones. We do the contracting, but we don't manage the processes, looking at standardizing models and whatnot, and that is frankly a great opportunity for us. You know, I'm going to ask, can you guess how much, can anybody just give me a hand? Can you guess how much we spent last year? Pat?
Cell phone number.
How much? over $600,000. So we're looking at a process. We're going to look at plans. We've already consolidated. Maybe there's further consolidation, looking at potential models, et cetera. That's going to kick off as soon as we get right after this meeting. We are examining software that's on our computer, on our mainframe. Maybe there's stuff that people are no longer using, and we're probably still paying some license fees. How do we get rid of that? We've had Todd involved in talking to the procurement process. There's different, we've already gone to some efficiencies with the Pro Card, but there's other efficiencies to be had. Even though we've gone to a Pro Card, we still pay those bills individually. There is different ways of doing that. And then last but by no means least, these are just the quick things that we could think of in terms of when we were looking for examples. We have 70 boards and commissions. Some of them not very active, some of them maybe need to be rethought and are part of a different process than what we've had. So those are the examples. Now, they're not all services, but someone provides the service to do this. All right, the program office. Provide criteria and guidelines. That was in tiny letters on that org chart. Provide guidance. People are going to need some guidance. So let me just give you an example. Where we have individuals delivering a service, that's probably easy. We're going to go over and say, can you write down what you do? But what if you have a group of people? They all deliver the same service. You might have a meeting and say, we all pretty much do the same thing. So let's document that we have 10 people doing this. They're all pretty much doing the same thing. And hopefully part of that meeting is there something that we can do better? That in itself starts a conversation, and that's what we want. Remember, the mayor said we don't mingle very well. Well, we mingle among ourselves, but then we might have to expand a little bit. The program office will also provide some assistance, maintain a scorecard. Metrics are important, offer evaluation assistance, and assist with estimating savings if we can. If it's a number of people or if it's a certain process, et cetera. So there will be help. But you know what? There is no true recipe on how to do this. The directors, roles and responsibilities. Coordinate in your division or department, work with the program office, work with me or other people that we've already identified. This is the focal point. You are the focal point. Assistance service and identifying what that service is. And we can go through that. And if possible, estimate the cost. Like I said, this I think is the most difficult. Employee involvement. This is where it starts. It's the employees who deliver the service. Document specific services. Identify the handoffs, and that's important. Where is the handoff, especially between one department to another department or one group to another group? Because it's in the handoffs that you find duplication. And then make suggestions of actions and services that could be evaluated. And here's where that judgment piece comes in. Let's not judge too early. Let's not judge too early and say this is not going to work. And then have them participate in meeting progress and updates. Now, what's going to change? The directors' meetings we've already changed it. This is really the first in a series of how the change will occur. The meetings will be monthly. We're going to ask all of you to come in and provide us some input. Review the services that you've identified. And these are going to be monthly, remember, for 6 months. So it's not just somebody up here giving a presentation and talking to you. It's talking among ourselves and with you. How can we make this better? And this is where the metrics become important. We're asking employees for ideas. So how do we reward them? And you know what? I don't have an answer for you yet, but this is being looked at. We've involved HR, we've talked with the law department, we've talked, what is it that we can do within the guidelines that we have and the constraints that you have? You know, in the private sector, this is many times not an issue. If you come up with a bright idea, you usually get some reward. This is more difficult. But I want you to know that this is under discussion and that we are considering what can be done. I think it's very important because one good idea may not only save us ultimately money in the long run, but make a job easier, make it safer, make people want to come to work because they participated in the process. So if you have any input to us, we'll be happy to take your input. So this is sort of a flow chart of how things would work, and we've kind of wanted to make sure that you got a little bit of guidance, but in many cases, you're probably going to make up your own process of how you approach this. Remember, we want to start here, a departmental meeting, a kickoff meeting. Now, if your department or your division is too big or whatever, you divide however you think makes sense. But I would like to have you transmit this message to everybody. And there'll be some help for you to do that. If you're not comfortable, please let me know. We'll have people that can come out and do some of these presentations or help you to do them. The other thing here, right? Prioritize and department products and services. And you may not be able to get them all at the first run. You might only be able to do a percentage of them. And then how do we evaluate? And as you go down this chart, you can take a look at and say, develop the Rethink Ops projects and the report status. And so this is a long process. All along here, you've got the executive steering committee. We can go back and report. So on a very, very macro level, that's how the process would work. Sample scorecard, and we may change this, but I wanted you to see something of what we were thinking. Number of services identified, what percentage is that? Have you looked at any prioritizing? Not all services are going to make the top 3. Remember, many of the services that your employees, our employees provide may be perfectly fine the way they are. But there will be some that the opportunities will be very, very good. All right, I took this out of a book. So let me hold up the 2 books that I would like for you to buy. A whack on the side of the head and a kick in the seat of the pants. Together, these 2 books on Amazon are $23. They're fun. The letters are big. They got cute drawings in them. And this one sort of gets your attention. That's the whack on the side of the head. So when I asked you not to judge, this list comes from this book. The right answer. How do you kill an idea? This is not the right answer. It's not my area. How often do you hear that? It's not logical. Don't be foolish. Follow the rules. Avoid ambiguity. Be practical. It's never going to work. And to err is wrong, and play is frivolous, and I'm not creative. That's all in here. It's got great examples. It's a fun book to read. This one is more of a how-to. The how-to is really when a new idea comes up, when you want to be creative, how do you pull out of people that creative side? How do you pull out of people that side that says, this might work? And then finally at the very end, you've got a group of people who know how to make this work. So there's like 4 stages. It starts with imagination, exploring, and finally the person who can either put it together into manufacturing. But these are fun. All right. And that's why I asked you not to judge too early. Because this could be fun. Now, how do you communicate this? Well, we already said we're going to have monthly meetings of the directors, but you hold your division meetings, whatever works for you. But within a month, we're coming back, and we're going to ask you to, first of all, have you had your meeting? And have you started to look at your services? We might even ask you, some of you may be extremely aggressive in how you pursue that, and I'm encouraging that. And we might ask you to do a presentation. Now, the minute we leave here at 10 o'clock, we're going to have LexLink go live. This presentation will be on there. Chris will be kind enough to upload this video. But remember, we're happy to do this in person. Monthly meetings I've already talked about. Scheduled updates to keep the council informed. And yesterday, the mayor was there, and we went and talked to 3 groups of council members. Every council member has already heard this to some extent. The council will be informed with the same presentation during work session on Tuesday. So if some of you want to listen and you're gluttons for punishment, you can listen to this again. And then there will be a form stack that employees can fill out. They'll go anonymously. Or you can get on Rethink. This is already, will be established, it will be available. An email ID. You can send us ideas. You can tell us that we don't know what we're doing. You know what? We're not going to judge. Each of the output will be examined on a weekly basis, so we can say, you know, we're looking for stuff. So your employees don't have to necessarily come to you. They can provide this through this means. All right, so, you know, the summary. Tell them what you told them and tell them what you told them again. We've reviewed the initiative, you know, and the mayor reviewed the 2 other columns that this is all part of a package. Discussed the initiative. We've now the participation of each division, what the expectations will be. We'll provide guidance, and we will review the ongoing progress, because that's the intent. So, happy to take questions, happy to have discussions, and thank you for keeping an open mind.
Thank you, Aldona.
So what do you think? Now you can tell me, you know, this isn't going to work.
Tyler just whispered, I don't want to do it. Sorry.
It is bottom up, which is very different. There is no goal. And you know, all of you, I'm sure, watch TV. Remember when companies are restructuring? And the financial community gets all excited because the company will announce, we're going to save $1 billion or whatever. We're going to restructure these offices. We're going to close these drugstores or whatever. We're not doing that. We've taken 15%. Now tell us how we can exist and exist better. And that's a bottom up. And some people might tell you, you know, now that you've cut this budget, I can't do it the same way. But how can we do it? So I want to hear from you.
Well, actually, I'll start. This is timely for Partners for Youth because we're actually having a staff retreat next month to look at our programs. I said this is timely for Partners for Youth because we're actually looking at our programs now that we have a full staff to reevaluate how we deliver services, if we're duplicating services, such as Adopt a Park and Gaines Way. We think that we're duplicating. So along with our community partners, we're reviewing it and going to come up with a calendar so that we can plug in where it's appropriate. So just everything as a whole, revisiting our programs and seeing what we can do better and how we can do it more efficiently.
Great, great, thank you. Thank you for starting. By the way, there are some things that you might identify that you can't do right away without some money, without some investment. We want to know those. If there's an investment to be made, longer term to make us more efficient, to do it the better, we want to know that. That's where the prioritization comes in. Because we're hoping that this is going to spin off some projects. Thank you. Others? Don't be shy. There's no right answer.
I think it's I think it's a great idea and great opportunity. My only challenge will be trying to fit the discussions and everything else into folks' everyday work schedule that's already packed full.
No.
It's just finding the time to do this and give it its best effort. You know, the idea and the concept, you know, we try to do this ourselves, like you said, you know, every couple years, but it's just finding that time when you're already overworked.
And I can appreciate that. So let me just give you a little suggestion. Meetings don't need to be long. I had either the good fortune or the opportunity to do this when I worked in the oil business. I flew to every refinery, every chemical plant, and in many cases with no conference rooms, no nothing. You stood up in the plant, and sometimes it was a 10-minute conversation. And I would encourage you today, you know, our employees don't need to be all go to one room, sit down. This is, we used to call it the fountain talk. You collect at the drinking fountain, and you have a 5-minute conversation. And you may not be able to get everybody there, but you might be able to get 50% of your people there. You don't necessarily need to collect in one building. So I would encourage the conversations around in a much more informal way. Now, what we're asking them is to just document what they do initially. What do they work on? What do they do? What do they provide? So I don't want to make this laborious. I don't think anybody wants to make this. We don't want to add more work. We want you to document your work. And it may be very simple. I pick up refuse. And that's what I do. I sweep the streets. Others? Anybody else? Come on, come on. Yes.
I think government, just, sorry. I do think that government has a lot of opportunity for efficiencies, and I think it's an important exercise. And I think, and of course, on year 20 here, you know, government often our work is intermingled. You know, whether it's our communications, whether it's meeting with each other, and we see different obstacles or roadblocks in processes that we don't have control over. And so I think reflecting internally is an enormously beneficial exercise, but I think also the dialogue needs to continue to expand beyond the boundaries of our own divisions and looking at our internal customers that we depend on to make progress.
You make a very good point. Everybody's got a customer. Internally, every group has an internal customer.
All right. That was it.
Now, you mentioned one thing, though, roadblocks.
Yes.
If there's roadblocks, document your roadblocks. You can't get rid of them if you don't talk about them and get people to help you. I used to say that management only has 2 responsibilities. One of them is to make sure you've got the resources to do your job. That's both people and money. And 2, to remove roadblocks. Other than that, management doesn't have a whole lot to do. Now, both of those consume you. Others? Other ideas? Other? Come on, speak up. Yes, did I see a hand back there?
I feel like the ball boy at Wimbledon.
So, yeah. So we. Okay. So we charge $25 for a land disturbance permit, whether it's a single-family home or it's a 20-acre development.
Oh my gosh.
So we could bring some revenue in quickly, but I say but because the appetite for that in the past has not been there. The appetite for raising any money for services provided
I agree.
is a hard sell to the mayor and council. So that's the challenge we have, is that we can generate you more revenue. It's just what will the kickback be from the development community?
Yeah, and you make a good point. But you know, it's always, we kind of discussed this a little bit yesterday. It's hard to do this when times are really good. It's a little bit easier to do this when times are not so good. But you know, I think that in those places where we are not recovering the cost, that needs to be pointed out. I think that it is our duty in here to point that out. And then it's the council's duty to figure out whether we really want to do that ultimately. But the point is, we need to identify it because nobody else will identify that. Great point. Yeah.
Good water cooler discussion.
Yep. Others? Yes.
Thanks, Glenn. I feel like I'm on a show. I was just going to add, I mean, as we start this process, a lot of us sitting in this room may have years of experience, some of us fewer. I mean, we have a lot of ingrained knowledge in us that we can put out there, but also don't overlook those who are new to the government.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
they come in with a fresh perspective. I've been guilty of this. I've been around long enough that you just accept things, and then new people are like, well, why aren't we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it that way? So it's interesting to see both perspectives, and I just wanted to make sure that we don't just forget about the ones who've only been here even a week.
Yeah.
They may have some
Yeah.
insight.
Because actually, they're the ones that ask some of the best questions. Why are we doing it this way? Or could we do it a different way? And you're absolutely correct. Anybody else? We're done? Are we done? Yeah. Just want to remind, Glenn reminded me that we're asking you to bring the same group. All you are here, or maybe even some folks who could not participate today, in a month. And we'll pass out a schedule on the date. But it's going to be in about a month. Yes. Now, one of the things you can go on, you can go on online on the intranet, and actually I think it says Lex link, and within that is going to be the Rethink button. That's where you'll find everything that you need about this program. Thank you. Thank you.